Your state's attorney general is trying to reinstate a 1901 law from before Arizona was a state, which bans all abortion except to save the life of a mother. Will you support that? Should abortion be banned in Arizona?
Well, listen, Dana, I know you know that I'm proudly pro-life. This will be left to the courts to decide, but ultimately it should come back to the legislatures and the people to make these decisions. So do you support a total ban or do you not? What do you personally believe as governor? On what I ran on in 2014 is that I am pro-life with exceptions for life of the mother, rape, and incest.
That was Arizona Republican Governor Doug Ducey just a few months after he signed a 15-week abortion ban into law, dancing, if we can call it that, around the question of whether he supports a near total ban on abortion. It's one that his attorney general is pushing in his state. Ducey's response is perhaps a sign that even some Republicans know their bad policies are bad politics, which may be why anti-abortion rights groups are now urging members of the Republican Party to veer left, stay away from some of the most extreme bills. Axios has some brand new reporting that says they want Republicans to rally around one piece of federal legislation. Lexi McCammon reports this. A memo from SBA Pro-Life America sent to Republican lawmakers last week includes talking points on how to answer hostile abortion questions and a plea not to cede the issue to state lawmakers. Anti-abortion activists don't want Congress to leave the issue entirely to states, given how many are committed to maintaining or strengthening abortion rights. The memo urges Republicans to rally around the most ambitious legislation that can achieve consensus, rather than split off on competing bills. Joining us now, the reporter with that scoop, Alexi McCammon, political reporter for Axios, also an MSNBC contributor. We are also very lucky today to be joined by Dr. Tracy Wilkinson. She's an assistant professor of pediatrics at Indiana University. She is a colleague of Dr. Caitlin Bernard, the doctor we told you about last week, who took care of and performed an abortion on a 10-year-old victim of rape who had to travel outside of her state to receive medical care. Claire is still with us as well. Alexi, why don't you tell us about what you're reporting?
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on to talk about this. We are watching the politics around the reversal of Roe change pretty quickly. Just a few weeks ago, we were all hearing from Republicans and talking about how Republicans and folks who are anti-abortion were saying this isn't really going to affect the midterms. People are only going to care about economy, inflation, crime, things of that nature. Now we're seeing folks who are anti-abortion leaders and groups like SBA Pro-Life America really encouraging Republican lawmakers not to give up on this issue, even though the Dobbs decision has come down. They're worried that a handful of states will be able to strengthen abortion rights in spite of the reversal of Roe. And they're basically saying to Republicans, these extreme measures that some of your colleagues are proposing across the country in places like Louisiana and Texas, where folks are talking about criminalizing women and people who seek abortions, is hurting the overall Republican Party. They're looking to the 2022 midterms. They're looking ahead to 2024. And they're thinking about how to get the party behind one ban, something like a 15-week ban or 6-week ban is what they point to, so that they don't have interviews like what you just showed with Governor Ducey, where they are caught flat-footed trying to explain their position when folks assume that they all have the most extreme position on this.
But Claire, the problem is they do. And here's the other problem for them. 63% of all Americans supported leaving Roe in place. 83% of all Americans support exceptions to any abortion restriction in the cases of rape and incest. And life of the mother, a whopping 93% of all Americans support exceptions when the life of the mother's on the line. It's not where Republicans are. Here's today's Republican Party. The Idaho Republicans on Saturday rejected an amendment change to their party platform, voting 412 to 164 that would have allowed abortion to save a mother's life. Rejected saving a woman's life. Approved changes that criminalize all abortions without exceptions for rape, incest, or to save the mother's life. So if the rapist goes loose, only the rape victim gets prosecuted. That's today's Republican Party, Claire.
I hesitate to spend much time talking here because I'm so anxious to hear from this doctor because of what is happening in this country. I mean, the idea that the Wall Street Journal would make an assumption that a doctor telling about performing an abortion on a 10-year-old girl is lying. Now think about that. That's astounding that all these Republicans couldn't wait to go out there and say this doctor who provided this care was lying about it. What is wrong with these people? I mean, now we have doctors, and I know you're going to have a doctor talk about this, and I don't want to step on her knowledge of this subject, but we have doctors that have spent their entire lives caring about one thing, their patients. And you know what they have to care about now? Whether or not they go to jail, and then their patients. And that is what these people have done, whether it's a woman miscarrying or a victim of rape or incest. And Republicans are going to own it. And if the Democrats don't make them own it, then that will be a tragedy.
Dr. Wilkinson, first tell us how Dr. Bernard is doing. I know we read from the op-ed that you penned in the New York Times, and I learned over the weekend that you and she had planned to pen that together. But when she became a target, it was published just under your name. Tell us how she's doing and what your thoughts are just a few days into, which is really, as Claire's describing, a tragedy for Dr. Bernard and the compassionate care she gave this rape victim.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Dr. Bernard is one of the most compassionate and competent physicians that I have ever worked with. And so it was heartbreaking to watch her basically, reputation attempted ruin on national television. Back to what Senator McCaskill just said, we watched, multiple reporters who claimed that they cared about the facts, and editorial boards follow the lead of anti-abortion activists that painted a picture of this story being fake because it didn't fit with their agenda. When this patient is real, and there are many other patients just like her out there.
Dr. Wilkinson, I had the chance to speak with Dr. Bernard's lawyer, and I asked her this question. I'll ask you. Why can't the pro-life, extreme anti-abortion right accept that this 10-year-old rape victim existed?
Because it makes them uncomfortable, and it shows the fallacy of their argument. These decisions belong in the hands of patients. And when legislators and politicians are saying that they know better than patients who live their lives and know their circumstances and know what is best for them, we should all be alarmed. These decisions do not belong at state houses. They never should be, but they have been for years, and it's time for all of us to fight back and say that that is unacceptable.
Dr. Wilkinson, I want to read something else about Dr. Bernard. The Indianapolis Star is reporting that she briefly considered giving up providing abortion care after a threat to kidnap her daughter in 2020. It goes on to say this: Dr. Bernard testified about the 2020 threat in sworn testimony in a federal abortion lawsuit last year. The threat caused her to stop working for several months at a South Bend abortion clinic, she said in her testimony. She said the FBI advised her on extra security steps she could take, such as taking a different route to work every day. Quote, "This is a known risk," she said. "I knew this going into the job. I knew this going into a state like Indiana, and I chose to do it anyway. So therefore, when it happens, I need to continue the mission I came here for." Claire made the point, but it is worth reminding everyone every day of the extraordinary risks that physicians like Dr. Bernard take every day to be able to provide this care.
Yeah, attacks against abortion providers and people that work in abortion clinics are not new, unfortunately. That is what is so scary. They are being attacked for doing their job, for providing compassionate health care and providing legal health care that should be accessible by everyone. And the fact that anybody would have to question that and put a decision between providing that care and keeping their family safe should be unacceptable to all of us in this country.